we'll go ahead and get started. Um, Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. We're very excited to have Ricardo Roemhild joining us all the way from Munster, Germany. I've had the pleasure of working with him in the past. It's been fantastic, and I'm so glad that he's decided to share some of his just really fantastic work that he's been doing with folks in Germany. So I'm going to just turn it over to you, Ricardo.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you everyone for having me today. So the title of my talk is AI for the Greater Good, and you can already see some idealism in here. The idea is to proceed in 3 steps today. First, I want to give you some context, that is language education in the age of AI and digitality. Then I'm going to address the greater good in the title and talk about contours of a language pedagogy of hope. And then I'm going to talk about ChatGPT and image creators and the potential role of AI in language education. So in terms of context, I'm from the University of Münster in northern Germany, and I work in the field of English language education. So what I actually do is I teach and educate future teachers of English at primary, secondary, and vocational schools here in Germany. So we have to, let me just check here. We have to find a balance as educators, I find, between various frameworks that exist when it comes to AI and digitality. For example, in Germany, we have the DICCOMP framework. We have national guidelines, supplementary strategies to those national guidelines. We also have the curricula of the federal states, and there are 16 different federal states, so 16 different curricula. And all of this is before we even talk about policy guidelines on a European and supranational level, such as the Common European Framework and Council of Europe documents. And that's the administrative side, the political side. But of course, there's also insecurity on the side of us educators and insecurity on the side of learners and students, and also a very fast-paced technological field when it comes to AI. So today, I don't claim to have any answers. In fact, I'm largely talking about something today in which I have no clue at all, I would say. But what I can do is offer a perspective, one that is informed by my field of work, that is language education, English as a foreign language, and also that is informed by my most recent body of work on the exploration of hopeful language pedagogies. My observation is that the discourse on AI in education has been rather pessimistic. We tend to focus on the threats and the challenges, in the sense that AI is going to make educators redundant in the long run. Learners are going to use AI to cheat all the time. But today I want to draw a different picture, and I'm heavily relying on wonderful work that's been done by those at the forefront of learning with AI, most notably in our context, Thomas Strasser at the University of Vienna, or the Pedagogical University in Vienna, in Austria. Here we can see conceptualization of different ways to think of AI and learning. And this is by an educator in Germany and his blog. So we can think of AI and learning in the sense of learning about, through, without, despite, and with AI. And there are some really interesting ideas represented in this. For instance, learning without AI still remains a possibility. Learning despite AI is an interesting one, I find, but I also like the implications of learning about, through, and with AI. And it is this last one, learning with AI, which will be in the center of my talk today. There are multiple applications of AI that are already used in the language classroom, and where you can also easily see the significance, right? For example, DeepL as an AI translation tool, we can do simple translations, but also much more than that. It helps you refine your grammar and style of writing. By the way, am I supposed to let people enter, or is somebody else going to do that?
No, we'll do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So AI, like DeepL, helps you refine your grammar and style of writing. It offers genre knowledge, and it helps you address questions of register, which is highly interesting in the language classroom, of course. But it also serves you all the way to writing a text for you. And this is DeepL, right? ChatGPT is much more advanced than that, especially in its latest version. And this then raises questions, especially with us educators, whether this is cheating or not. What if a student uses AI and large language models, such as ChatGPT, to write an essay and hand it in as their own work? So there are other options as well, offered by AI-powered machines, including image generators, which you can use in the classroom, and also video and presentation generators. And here we're talking about creativity, which AI can either take over or help you materialize in the long run. And as an educator, you can even go to websites and have AI plan a lesson unit on a specific topic for you, or have AI create worksheets ready to use in the classroom. I've done that a couple of times now. If we can do that, then every homeschooling parent can do that, and every kid can do that as well. So are we becoming redundant? I would say no, because these AI-powered machines make our lives easier as educators and learners, but they also complicate certain aspects. And these are the things that only trained educators can bring to the classroom. For instance, I'm thinking of sociocultural, emotional aspects of learning, as well as the critical in critical media literacy. Critical thinking in terms of biases and the perpetuation of power structures here, which we can see in AI all the time, as its sources is whatever humanity offers it. So AI image generators have a much easier time generating white people, for example, or to be much more specific, white males. And this is where AI falls short and where we need human, just thought I'd highlight that here, human educators in the classroom to help learners uncover the hidden biases and power structures pervading our systems, which are only reproduced with AI. So the things I mentioned so far touch on central aspects of the language classroom and this conference's theme, critical media literacy. Assessment, the role of critical media literacy, its significance, and of course, language learning. So these are three elements that we would have to keep in mind moving forward and that I will return to in the course of this talk. So far, I've talked about things as Thomas Strasser or Frauke Marz of the University of Münster, and many others could have told you too, and probably much better. However, what I have been working on lately has been a language pedagogy of hope. And in this middle section of my talk, I'm going to lay the groundwork for a marriage of these two ideas, working with AI in the language classroom in the sense of a language pedagogy of hope. We need to draw a twofold distinction here first. On the one hand, we can think of language pedagogy of hope in terms of a way of thinking and doing language education, which is inspired by, among other things, Ferry's or Bell Hook's pedagogies of hope. Think of a general framework for language education, complete with its own set of core principles and learning objectives. On the other hand, we can, but also closely related to this first idea, is the notion that educators and learners approach the use of AI not with fear, but with a positive mindset. I talk about language pedagogy of hope in the context of sustainability and global citizenship in the article that I linked here for you if you're interested. Just scan the QR code. But I would argue that AI and digitality so profoundly transform the way we live that we have to consider them as part of the question how we want to live together in the future. In light of the rather pessimistic discourse that surrounds AI and my observation, I would argue that learning to deal with AI and everything that comes with it is a question of social and discursive participation, and therefore inextricably linked to questions of access, power, and social sustainability. With that said, the cornerstones of a language pedagogy of hope are, among other things, future orientation and learner agency. Future orientation in the sense that learners look at the status quo critically and take that into account when developing what Oyala calls pathway thinking towards a future which is not yet. The crucial point here, though, is that learners are taken seriously as agents of change from the very beginning and in their own rights. They are not passive consumers. They actively shape their very own futures and need to be empowered, or rather supported, in this self-understanding and in their agency. Agency in the language classroom translates as communicative agency, among other things. So what if we stop thinking about assessment for a second and instead focused on what should truly be at the center of each educator's mind, the learning progress of the learners? If we do that, I would suggest that, again, in line with Thomas Strasser, whose work is really extremely recommendable in this context, that there are numerous potential plus sides to learning to work with AI in the language classroom and beyond. In terms of individualization, we could explore the potential of AI to help individual students with individualized language-focused feedback, both in written and in oral form. In terms of critical media literacy, maybe let's not think about CML so much as a shield against AI, but as an essential literacy for participation and empowerment to deal with AI in our everyday lives and those of our learners. It bears repeating that learners are agents already. They are active rather than passive consumers on a philosophical level, much more Freirean rather than Frankfurt School perspective on criticality here. We can use AI to promote creativity, and we can also use it to help learners engage with the foreign language. And in my final section of the talk, I'm going to share a few examples to illustrate just how that might be done. The two examples are the use of ChatGPT and image generators, which both rely on prompt engineering, or perhaps in more accessible terms, with regards to the learners, spell casting. Casting spells or engineering prompts is a highly complicated process which needs to be mastered, especially in a foreign language. But therein also lies great language learning potential, because you can build in language loops to help learners approach an understanding of how prompts work on a linguistic level and how to formulate prompts to get what you want quickly and successfully. Molek and Molek developed 7 approaches, not specifically geared for the language classroom. And also they state that these are still in their infancy and not tested yet. But what they suggest is to create a prompt that we need 3 things: expertise, time, and also a vision of what we want the prompt to do. So the AI can take on several different roles, each complete with distinctive sets of advantages and drawbacks, or even risks. I included the QR code here again, so you can access the article in your own time. But one of the most central ideas here is that AI use could be in the shape or in the role of a mentor, a tutor, coach, teammate, student, simulator, or even as a tool. And I'm gonna just leave you here for a second to have an overview of the pedagogical benefits and pedagogical risks associated with each of these roles. Moving on. Again, you can scan the QR code and then you can access this in your own time. A tutor, or you in ChatGPT, for example, used as a tutor, would be used for increasing knowledge. If you use it as a coach, you'd increase metacognition. As a mentor, it provides a balance and maybe ongoing feedback. And again, Thomas Strasser has great examples of using ChatGPT and other AI appliances to generate feedback, which is super individualized and can be used at any given point in time. Using it as a teammate is to increase collaborative intelligence, using it as a tool for extending students' performance. If you use ChatGPT as a simulator, it might help you with practice. And if you use it as a student, you can teach it to check if you've understood everything and if you understood how to present and how to explain things. And this is based on Frau Komatz's presentation on AI and its use in the language classroom as well. So all of these can be used in highly individualized ways, thus working towards differentiation and individualization in the language classroom. And if we explore and harness the power of AI with our students, we can use it to cater learning processes towards the individual needs of our students. And I would argue that that opens up spaces in the classroom for educators to focus on the things AI cannot do, where we need human qualities, such as sociocultural literacies, critical literacies, including critical media literacy, which constantly needs to evolve. And I know that Jeff and others are continuously working on updating the concept and its core questions to better reflect the state of technological developments. So maybe we need a different mindset, right? And I could already see in chat, Raul is talking about the idea that we need to work together and not try and come up with potential answers all by ourselves. Absolutely agree. With regards to the language classroom, maybe the mindset needs to change in terms of what AI can provide us with, what options we can generate from using it in terms of individualization, creativity, and language learning. With regards to writing, for example, Frau Gematz asks if it is really cheating, or if we can utilize ChatGPT for help. Do we need to go back to in-class essays, or can we use prompt making, spellcasting as part of an assignment? Thomas Strasser reports of a practice, which I think is highly interesting. He lets his students, he works at university, so BA and master students, and he lets his students use AI in term papers, so long as they treat the passages generated by AI as a source and provide the reference for it. Interesting. As regards reading, again, Frauke asks, what about detailed questions? Should we still ask them or should we not? Because reading with AI might already yield all these questions, but then maybe we can check the answers and compare results with AI, and thus train our critical literacies, both in terms of reading, but also in terms of media use and AI use. What you can see here on the slide is AI as a mentor, according to Malik and Malik. And they've just used a text, or actually this whole thing is the prompt, but they show you what a prompt really involves. And you can see role and goal specification, constraints, so as to get very specific results, step-by-step instructions to make these results even better, personalization and pedagogy. So as I said, it's a very, very complicated and complex process to actually get to really good prompts that give you exactly what you want. And therein lies a lot of language learning potential, I would argue. Now, that's ChatGPT. I also want to talk about image generators. And for that, I can report on something that I did myself together with Nitas, who is a eco-pedagogue. We did a workshop on language, on sustainable development and the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, in June just this year. I had the chance to help facilitate this workshop, offered to Chinese students. It was a group of, I think, 10 Chinese students who were on an exchange program to Berlin. And my colleague and friend Nitas, who works with Bard College in Berlin and New York, he facilitated that. So Nitas does great work as an eco-pedagogue, and he and I planned this workshop where the students engage with the SDGs in a hopeful way. And what I mean by that is this. Everything that you can see on the slides now is part of the outcomes of this. These are AI-generated images that the students created. We worked with the SDGs. We got to know them better. We tried to understand their goals, discuss the SDGs. And then I asked the students to identify missing aspects and the SDGs. They could focus on one, or they could focus on an 18th SDG. As you know, there are 17, but maybe an 18th is missing. So something that the current SDGs do not cover. The goal was to make the SDGs better from the perspective of the students. And then the students formulated those missing aspects, such as concrete indicators as to how the SDGs are interconnected, for example. And what you can see here, this image emerged from the idea that the strive for peace connects us all as humans, but also connects all SDGs to one another. Then the Chinese students formulated prompts to visualize their cover image for the SDG that they were working with, or the cover image for their 18th desired SDG. And again, this was prompt engineering, spellcasting, with a lot of language loops. Now, this wasn't originally a language-focused workshop, right? This was a sustainability-focused workshop, but coming from language education, I couldn't help myself. And put in some language loops, because if you don't buy the pro version of these AI image generators, they take some time. And we use this time to revisit all the spells and all the prompts and try to make them much more concise, much more descriptive, using more adjectives, elaborating the ideas more clearly, so as to get to the really perfect picture in the mind of the student. Here's a very powerful example, I feel. And we got to this via multiple iterations to get to this desired image. If you read through it, you will still detect some grammatical mistakes here and there. Again, this is because the workshop wasn't necessarily focused on language. But I feel that this workshop helped the students voice very powerful messages and very powerful voices. Nitas then encouraged them to create a zine, which is like a short magazine, a sort of reflective journal, a scrapbook, a collage of what the students thought were powerful moments, inspiring activities and materials that they engaged with during that exchange week. And the use of AI embedded in hopeful pedagogy made quite an impression. And I think that this is a great summary of the experience with and the potential of AI in the language classroom. It is there, whether we want it or not. So we shouldn't run away from it, rather learn together with the students and, in the sense of Raoul, together with one another, to use it to our advantage in the classroom. Creativity, individualized feedback, and even on the educator side, AI may lift some of the workload and open up spaces to focus on other, sometimes more important things. So we should find ways in which AI supports educators and learners in the same vein. And I would argue that going full circle to the conference theme on critical media literacy, that we should think of critical media literacy as empowerment, as a piece of participation in this context, rather than as a shield versus manipulation. And with that, thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Thanks for having me, and I'm open for questions and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. All right, Ricardo. I love this move of really naming this work as empowerment and from a positive, critical, hopeful lens. So I'd love to, let's open it up for questions. Who would like to share or ask anything? Please feel free to just unmute or to type a question into the chat. All right, well, we're waiting for questions. I'm going to pose my first because I'm fascinated with your take on AI. And I think having this difficult balance between criticality and empowerment is essential. But I'd love to hear just about what you think some of the challenges are that you've been experiencing or seeing coming up.
In terms of what exactly? The challenges with AI, or the challenges of finding that balance between criticality and empowerment?
Yeah, the challenge with the balance, because I think AI still, is so volatile, it's changing every day. But in terms of the teaching, the pedagogy, the challenges with bringing the critical component, because to me, I think that's kind of the key in what we're doing that's different than what most other people do.
Absolutely. Maybe my first, a little bit of context to contextualize my perspective and what I'm about to say. Since I work in teacher education at university, some of the things that I do most of the times is work through curricula and be also on a practical level, but also on a conceptual theoretical level, to think about education and language education and what it can do and cannot do in terms of a contribution towards sustainability and a more just world, right? And empowering our students or enabling our students to be part of this world. That said, the challenges that I see most of the times are structural, systemic, and on a curricular level as well, because many times the concepts that we're working with in the language classroom that guide practice at schools are very much focused on functionality. So it's all about being able to just speak, being able to just say and express yourself in the foreign language, right? But then I ask myself, what for exactly? And in what context? And this is where criticality really comes in. And then for me, it's really not a balance between criticality and empowerment, because for me, they're on the same part of the scale, right? It's a balance between functionality and criticality in order to have our learners be participants and active participants in the global discourses that surround them and that make up their life worlds. So for me, it's really criticality. How can we bring criticality and functionality in balance rather than trying to balance criticality and empowerment?
Great, thank you. We have a question in the chat from Avalon. She says, regarding bias in AI generation, what do you recommend for students and educators to do to combat producing biased content using AI?
That's a really good question. I would argue, from my very, very limited experience and understanding of AI, but I would argue that first and foremost, what we could focus on is to dismantle and to learn to notice these biases. Because AI, as far as I understand, learns from what we offer it, right? It takes its databases from the internet, from everything that humanity has produced. And if there's one thing that's for certain in human history, it's that it's history of biases and of oppression, of systematic and systemic injustices. So AI is always going to produce biased content and try to avoid that. I don't have an answer to that. I hope that it's possible. But for me, it's more being able to deal with that and being able to detect the biases and then come in with what makes us human: criticality, empathy, the sociocultural aspects and all that, to find a way to deal with that.
Terrific, thank you. Raul, will you go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, Ricardo, thank you for the presentation. I mean, very enlightening. It gave me lots to think about, lots of food for thought. And one of the things I think, as we talked about these coalescence, I would love to get your take on this. It's how do we get especially educators away from this paranoid mindset? Where no, because because there are two levels of paranoia when it comes to AI. There is, on the one hand, the Terminator is coming, hide Sarah Connor and protect John Connor at all costs mentality that you see. Like kind of basically like, if your name is Sarah Connor, please hide because the T-800 is coming. And then on the other hand, but that's one thing. And the other hand is this notion that there are teachers thinking that students are going to cheat by default, that the default setting of students is cheating. That's the default setting. That they're going to use ChatGPT to cheat, so we should outlaw it, we should ban it, we should eradicate it. And I'm like, okay, but yeah, first of all, where does your paranoia come from? Because as the saying says, it takes one to know one. So for me, it's like it takes one to know one. So if you're paranoid because they're cheating, is because that's what you would do. So how do we help teachers get off this mindset that students are inevitably going to use ChatGPT to cheat? and maybe start thinking of possibilities for AI to really be, again, a supporting tool, to be an aid, to be an ally in the in the case of language learning, in the language learning process. So I would love to get your take on that one. And once again, amazing presentation. I'll be reaching out because I really want to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Raul. Looking forward to that. Two parts. You asked about the Terminator thing, which I think is very timely, because AI is not the only threat on the horizon that people see, right? We look at Ukraine, we look at Gaza, Israel right now. We just came out of a pandemic. There's a lot going on in the world right now. And this is where I can draw the connection to other research projects that we're working on at the University of Münster right now, but also I know that a lot of wonderful work is being done elsewhere in the world, and that is how to raise resilience. And I think that resilience is a key concept, a key word, and a key thing to develop in educators, but also in learners in this world of uncertainty and instability. I know that Vanessa Andreotti and the collective that she's working with in global citizenship education always use the VUCA acronym, volatile, uncertainty. All that describes the times that we're working in. And I think raising resilience in our educators is one way of combating this idea that AI as the Terminator is going to come. I don't have any answers yet, I'm very sorry, but I know that work is being done to find those answers. And I think that resilience is a key to that. Then the second point that you mentioned was how to avoid the paranoia that students are going to cheat. I think in order to cheat, you have to declare it forbidden, right? So my idea is to work with AI from the onset, rather than make it the forbidden fruit that is undeniably tasty and that students want to taste and then want to use, but rather have your students work with it. And that's why I think Thomas Strasser approach is so interesting, to let his students use AI and ChatGPT in their essays, in their term papers, and that is graded exam work at university. So let them use it, but in a reflected manner and in portions, right? You can't hand in the whole term paper having used AI. That would have been a fail, but you can use it in steps, and you can use it wherever you think it's appropriate. And there might be instances where it is appropriate. So why bar that from happening? Why bar our students from exploring AI and how they can use it? That would only set them back in the future when other people found out about the potentials of AI, I think. So help them understand AI in the way that they can use. And I think that eliminates the threat of, not eliminate probably, there's always going to be the one, but that's going to diminish the threat of people using AI to cheat. We had, by the way, we had the same discussions. I say we as if I was involved, but we had the same discussions when the calculator was introduced in mathematics. And now we're using it in exam.
Those are great examples, absolutely. And we probably had similar things when the invention of the printing press, going back a few more years.
Yeah.
Thank you. In chat, there's some questions. Carlos asks, ¿qué nuevos desafíos éticos se presentan frente a la manipulación de datos? So he's asking, what new ethical challenges are we facing with the manipulation of information and data?
That's a big one. Because it's all about fake news, right? Well, that's the same kind of direction. In the presentation that I also quoted today, Frauke Matz or likened the use of AI or data mining and the use of data, the selling of data, to oil, and how oil was being used as a resource and still is. So that's a very, very big question. I don't really have answers to that in the concept or in the context of AI, I did work on eco-documentaries in my dissertation. And with documentaries, the idea is that fact remain fact. And if you want to manipulate data, or if you want to manipulate reality in some way, we have to use critical media literacy. We have to develop critical media literacy in order to detect that. Because if as soon as you depart from the idea that facts remain facts, then we're entering this this Derrida kind of deconstructivist dystopia where nothing counts really anymore and there's no responsibility whatsoever. And I think that is really dangerous. And if that ever happens, then I'm going to lose my hope. So I'm not sure how to answer that question properly. But I would remain that fact remain facts, and that it's the ethical issues arising with that are the same ethical issues that I see when it comes to manipulation with fake news. For example, in the US election campaigns, but not only in the US, we're having election campaigns the same way in Germany and everywhere else. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and I also, it makes me think just how important it is to recognize the bias in all communication so that we try to move beyond the idea that there's truth and there's falsity, to recognize that there's always subjectivity, and that can help us better than determine what's most likely to be accurate and correct in terms of what happens and what's going on.
And I think that language education can play a major role there, because in the end, then we're talking about stories, we're talking about narratives. And that's at the heart of what language education and literary education is concerned with.
Absolutely. That's a great point. We have another question in the chat from Cynthia. She says, ¿Cómo convocamos a aquellos docentes que se resistan a estos nuevos cambios, en este caso AI? So how do we involve those teachers who resist these new changes, especially like you're referring to with AI?
Also a very good question. I would say that generally my experience with educators is that if you present them with absolutely new stuff and you present it as if it is groundbreaking new things, those people who are likely to resist will resist, as long as you show them until you show them that the things that you can do with the new things relate to aspects that they're already familiar with. So with AI now, that's a tricky one because AI is relatively new, right? But I think that you can find aspects in AI, especially in the use of AI, in the kind of questions we ask around AI, and in the kind of applications in the classroom that we're talking about. I think you can find a lot of parallels to other instances. As I said, the calculator, same thing. And the everyday use of devices that already use AI. And I mean, there's no way we get around this, right? AI is in our everyday life, whether we want this or not. And maybe it's the same answer as you would give to someone asking, how can we empower students to think about AI, and how can we help students to think about AI, to take them from where they are, to take them from where they start, and address their needs at the moment at which they find themselves. So make it relatable to them, connect with them on a level that they already know, and then slowly, step by step, move towards the new. That would probably be my answer to that. But Jeff, maybe you're far more experienced in these questions than I am. Do you have any insights on how you approach them?
No, I completely agree with you. I think we need to let them know this is not these are new tools and new issues, but it's still basically, like you said, it's storytelling. It's it's the stuff that we've all known, and the more important part is how do we support them to make these connections and to find ways to integrate it in with what they already know, what they're already doing, so that they can just improve what they're doing, and then especially bring in the critical questioning to support that idea that, you know, if they hadn't been doing critical teaching with books, it's going to be harder to do critical teaching with these new tools, but empowering them to think about how, you know, really good pedagogy. And this is where you started, where you were talking earlier about kind of the shift, right? This pedagogical shift away from that just functionality towards, you know, what Paulo Freire talked about, transformative, problem-posing type of pedagogy.
Yeah.
We have another question in the chat. Carlos asks, frente a las desigualdades educativas, ¿qué beneficios nos aporta el AI? So he says, facing these inequalities in education, what benefits can we get from AI?
Gracias, Carlos. And again, I would like to refer to the work of Thomas Strasse in my references. I think I can show you the slide with my references again, so you can take a picture of that in a second. He talks about that extensively because he has this very hopeful vision of the use of AI, not unrealistic. I just want to highlight that when I talk about hope, it's not unrealistic, dreamy, idealistic hope, right? It's set in our status quo and then takes that status quo, critiques it, and then moves forward. So very great question, because there are inequalities out there, and AI can help address them, but this is where economics come into play, and not all the AI appliances that are out there are free to use. The ones that I showed you, for example, Crayon or all those image generators, there's a free version out there that you can use, and that helps individualize, right? And that helps in the classroom, and it's available for everyone who has the devices to use them in the first place. But you can also buy the pro version. And then there are other AI appliances where you have to pay on a monthly basis, subscription-based. And that opens questions, or maybe even furthers the divide that is already there between those who can afford and those who can't afford education in the first place. Not even talking about AI at this moment then. So there are big challenges, and I like those questions a lot, because it shows us that these questions, these critical questions, accompany the AI discourse, which I think is a very good thing, because it balances out the functionalities of the use of AI, right? We have this criticality going on in parallel with questions of functionality, and I like that. I'm afraid I can't give exhaustive and maybe not even satisfactory answers on that one, but that's also because I think there's a lot to be found out and a lot to be said in terms of politics, to buy licenses for states, for countries, for schools, to make things more available to and accessible to everyone.
I want to add, or kind of push this a little bit. What happens when these tools that we're seeing are controlled by commercial interests? Because I think one of the questions we're looking at is this now going to help move us towards the privatization of education and the loss of control over, but not just what's taught, but how it's taught.
And that would be detrimental, as we can see in numerous examples around the world right now, where there's ongoing privatization of education. And that doesn't even have to do with AI at this point, but we can already see that this is detrimental to education and the idea of education. Where, of course, coming from Germany, we have a very, very old way of looking at education in the Humboldt sense, right? Education as becoming human. And that has a lot of reflexivity and a lot of criticality in it already. It's far from what we're doing at German schools and German universities, some would argue, me being one of them. But this ideal is there of education becoming human. And yeah, Jeff, absolutely subscribe to that. That's a very big question then.
Terrific. We have just a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any other questions or comments that they'd like to share or ask?
What I can do in the background is show you the references again.
Great.
There you go.
This is fascinating, and it's so kind of pertinent today, and it's changing every second. It's such a difficult game to play, and we're talking about how do we prepare new teachers, how do we prepare working teachers who've been doing this for years, who are more resistant to change, and how do we even just theorize this type of work.
Yeah. And here's my plea for hopeful outlooks and hopeful visions in how we're doing that, how we are visualizing or how we're conceptualizing the work and the field. Because if we're succumbing to pessimistic views on what AI will do to us in the Terminator style, I don't think that gets us anywhere. It's important. Well, let me rephrase that. I think it's an important part of thinking about the appliances and the potentials, also the challenges and threats of AI in education. I think it's very important to do that, not to be blindsided by them. But I don't think that we should stop there. I think we should take that as a vantage point and as a segue into more hopeful discussions of what is the status quo like, what could go wrong, how do we avoid that, but more importantly, what could go really well and how do we get there? And I think that's the discussion to be had. I'm going to switch slides again for those of you who would like to stay in contact with me, just to offer you the opportunity to write down or take a picture of my email address. Always looking forward to connecting.
This has been fabulous. Ricardo, I want to thank you very much. I'll give him an applause. Your work has been very impressive, and your focus on kind of the positive way of empowering as opposed to just protecting or just kind of doing the functional aspects that are disconnected from the real world are really so essential here. So thank you very much. I hope everybody had a great time, and we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you.
Gracias a todos.
Okay, we'll stop the recording, and we're going to close the Zoom room so that we can start the next one. Thank you very much.